Hey, everybody, it is Thursday night. That means it's time for Shop Talk. I'm Josh Olive with Haven Comics, and we have got a show for you. So stick around. All righty. Alan is going to be a little bit late tonight. His daughter is sick, and he's doing some stuff to take care of her. So apologies for that. But we've got some great guest hosts coming on the show tonight with Owen. You guys all know Owen. And Damon. You guys all know Damon. And how are you guys doing?
Doing great.
I'm barely awake, but I'm here.
So, between the two of you, which I think if you were to get into a death match over who likes Starman the most, you would tie. Who do you think would win?
Damon.
Oh, I don't
He's got the experience.
I don't think there's any losers in this game. I think we're all lucky to have the stories.
Yes, I was gonna say he's more firmly in that Generation X. He survived a much more adventurous childhood than me. So
Well,
I caught the tail end of that.
Own special thing. I'll absolutely say that.
Yeah.
But let's waste no time. We have an amazing guest joining us tonight, so let's go ahead and bring him on. We have the one and only Mr. James Robinson.
Hey guys, nice to be here.
Oh. Happy to see you, sir.
So we are we're so glad to have you on. I don't know if anybody else is getting it. I'm getting like a delay where all the conversation is coming back seconds later.
I'm fine.
Yeah, I'm not getting that either.
I will try my best to ignore it, and we'll move on then. So, Mr. Robinson, cool. We've got something we want to talk about with you tonight, which specifically is Rogue's Kingdom, which is a Kickstarter you're doing with Jeff Johnson, and there are 2 more days on it. So you guys are not too late. You can still get it.
Yes,
and
please,
we would highly encourage you to do that.
While we start, I'm very. This is a project that Jeff Johnson and I have had gestating for quite some time, and we ended up doing the Kickstarter because honestly, Jeff needed to make money in order to do this, and I mean, he really aspires to do something worthy of like Hal Foster. I mean, it's beautiful, beautiful art. So and then the story is pretty good too. And we planned. I very much wanted this to be the kind of story. I had success many years ago with a series called Leave It to Chance, and one of the things that people liked about that series was that they could read it and enjoy it, but they could also read it to their kids and they could enjoy it, and they could maybe enjoy it on a different level, but they both got something out of it without feeling dumbed down or like it was a little kiddie's book. So we took a movie as our yardstick of what it will be in it in terms of violence and everything else. There'll be no bad language. Violence will be done cleverly. So the movie was the 1970s Three Musketeers. I don't know if any of you have seen that movie. But it's an amazing film, and it's still bawdy and it's still fun and it has amazing sword fights and stuff. But I remember seeing that movie at when I was 9 years old or 8 years old in the cinema, and it's always stayed with me. So that movie was sort of the inspiration for this fantasy world we've created, which has fashions and look that's a little bit reminiscent of 16th century France, but then there's dragons and mythical creatures and all that kind of stuff too. So it's inked. It's inked by Jeff. He's penciling and inking it, but it's colored by Brennan Wagner, who's Matt Wagner's son, and who's begun to really make a name for himself. And we have incredible variant covers. Ryan Sook has done a beautiful cover. Zach Howard, who is another artist, his cover's incredible. The detail in the city and stuff that he's put in it. Brennan, who's also aspires to be an artist when he's not coloring, has done a fantastic cover. And then Dave Johnson has done a variant, as he apparently does with every single book that's ever published. So it's a beautiful set of variants. The story's great. It's basically like an all-ages Game of Thrones, I suppose you could call it, in that there will be all of the stuff from Game of Thrones that you would be comfortable with a kid looking at, without scenes in brothels and God only knows what else they had in that show, and all the language and the gore too. Like if you look at Raiders of the Lost Ark, I mean, obviously you had the bit at the end with the shriveled heads, when they open the Ark, but overall, you could show that to a 5-year-old and you'd be fine with it. I mean, it's just a good adventure movie with good action. That's what we're going to do with this book, and we have a lot planned for it. Dragons in the future and all sorts of other things. It'll be a really great book, and I hope people get on board and enjoy it. Sorry, this is my spiel. I'll get this out of the way, and then you can ask me questions or whatever.
No, it's a great spiel. And as a matter of fact, I'm longtime fan of yours, longtime fan of Jeff's. And so he didn't tell us anything about this, but when you guys launched the Kickstarter, he put some original art on the Kickstarter.
Yeah. And
one of my favorite images from the series, he had the roughs for it as something you could get on the Kickstarter. So I jumped on that, and he has already sent that to me.
Oh, good.
So I will show that to you guys for anybody who hasn't seen it. This is just the rough pencils. It's not inked or any of that stuff of the cityscape.
Oh, goodness gracious.
That's and look at the insanity of that. Look at how awesome that is.
That's lovely.
So there's a lot of beautiful stuff in this like that. He really wants this to be his sort of masterpiece, and I'm not speaking out of school to say that people sort of don't quite know where to put Jeff sometimes, because he's here, he's there, and he's never sort of focused on something for any length of time beyond when he was doing. Well, that's not completely fair. He did that Scion book for that company.
He did
Way of the Rat.
Way of the Rat for CrossGen. Yeah,
and then he also did Wonder Man, of course, but he hasn't been around for a while. So he really wants this to be his his crowning achievement, and I think we can definitely pull that off together. I mean, I'm very proud of the series too, and I'm excited. I should say one last thing, less exciting than the beautiful art, I admit, but I got this kind of inspiration or thought from Ed Brubaker. In that, I was talking to him a long time ago when he was still doing Criminal in comic form, and he was doing the comic book comics, like the H.P. Lovecrafty one, Fatale.
Mm-hmm.
And I had said, hey, I love these articles in the back of the comic, and if you want me to do one, I'd be happy to. They're just fun to write. I don't need payment. And he said, well, if you wanted to, it's fine, but you should know that they will never be reprinted. They'll only ever be in the comic, because they're a kind of a reward for people that are buying that comic and stopping it from, when people trade weight, and I understand that comics are expensive. So it's the creator's responsibility to make those comics as compelling as they can, so that people don't want to trade weight. They want to read it every month. So with that said, the people still watch their pennies, and what can happen is you trade weight, and then the book doesn't sell at all, and the book's dead after 5 issues, 6 issues, and it never becomes what it could be. So he said that these articles that he did with the beautiful Sean, what is his name? His collaborator. It's just gone behind.
Martinborough?
Sean Murphy. No,
Sean Murphy. That's right.
Not Sean Murphy. Hang on a minute. Sean Phillips. I've got him on the wall.
Sean Phillips. Yeah.
so what I'm doing in Rose Kingdom, and then I'll also be doing in most of this creator-owned stuff I do, is writing short stories that deal with the backstory of certain characters, sometimes the major characters, and sometimes the supporting characters that you're not even aware of. For instance, in the first issue, we first meet our heroes, or two of our heroes. There's a few, there's a cast, but Rondo Manway, who's a sort of sellsword and a dashing kind of older sellsword guy, and then this young little pickpocket called Peachy Least. So Rondo and Peachy are in the back of a caravan, a wagon caravan of wagons and elephants pulling things and stuff. And they're in a prison cart in the back, and they hate each other, and they're insulting each other. And there's a third guy in the cart, and he's like, "Will you two shut up? Where I'm going, I'm probably going to get hung, and I still can't wait to get there just so I can get away from you two." So, for instance, the first short story is his story of how he got into that prison cart and the crime he committed, and it's sort of blackly funny, black humor.
I thought it was hysterical.
Oh, have you read it?
Yeah, Jeff sent Alan and I a preview of a PDF of it, and I thought the Arlo story was hysterical.
So, I mean,
I wasn't expecting it to tie into the characters.
I still need to read it through one more time, but so I'm glad you read it. But if you caught typos, believe me, I hope they won't be in the finished version.
I'm an English major, so yeah, that I live for grammar and stuff. But that story, I wasn't expecting him to be him in the back of the wagon until I saw what happened, the inciting incident, I suppose. And it absolutely cracked me up. I loved that story. I thought it was great and a great add-on to the whole issue itself. It helps build the world out, flesh it out a little bit.
Oh,
I love it.
Well, every single one of the issues of Rose Kingdom, as we do the following issues and everything else, there'll always be a short story, and those short stories will never be reprinted. They may one day be collected as a prose collection, maybe. But they will never be in a trade, or any of that. They're part of the reward that people get when they invest in the comic book. And I know me writing prose is perhaps not as exciting as the gift being, another variant cover by Dave Johnson, but that was fantastic. I'm teasing, but people that have maybe read my Shade backups where I would do his diaries in old issues of Starman, that I can write prose, and those were written years ago. I haven't published anything, but I've been working on prose constantly myself, and I'm now ready. I've just written a book, which I'll be launching as my own Kickstarter prose book in the next bit of time. But anyway, so that's part of the package that you get when you get an issue of Rose Kingdom. Long, rambling pitch, but there you go.
See, I absolutely loved the line, and what sold me on it, I believe the line was something like, the town was called East Grog, and as far as no one knew, there was not a West Grog, or something like that.
That was a great line. Yes,
owned me, because I love that type of humor.
Good. Well, I mean, then you'll enjoy that. And then I've already written the short stories that accompany the rest of the issues of the first arc. And what, to be honest with you, what happened was I started writing a story that I thought would be a finite short story, and it kind of grew and grew, and it actually became, the next 4 issues will have a 4-chapter. It's almost like it is a novella when you add them all together. So that prose that you enjoy and that humor, there's more of that to come. So hopefully everyone will enjoy the first issue, and then they'll be excited and willing to take that risk and keep going with the series.
Well, just so everybody is aware, the Kickstarter has already funded. It funded after 6 days, 7 days, something like that.
No, 5 days. I'm proud of that. So I want to correct you on that one.
Yeah, it funded very quickly, and there's good reason for it. As I alluded earlier, Alan and I have already seen a PDF preview, and it's fantastic. The hook for me, when Jeff was kind of laying out the basic plot, what really grabbed me when he says, okay, you got these two guys, and they're in the back of this wagon. They're being sent to court, to trial, whatever. And then you got this new wizard that's coming into the picture, and this new prince. And then, oops, something happens to them, but they happen to look a little bit similar to these guys. So poof, suddenly these guys just say, "Hey, this is the role we're going to take. We're going to make some quick cash. And we're going to get out."
Spoiling it, man. That's issue 2. You've got to be
Oh,
careful.
okay.
Yeah.
Jeff was explaining that to us.
Yeah, it is these two. The basic premise over the series is these two rogues come to Lumpland, which is one of the 3 cities that are in a sort of Cold War, if you like. And instead of nuclear weapons, where that in our world that keep countries at bay, we have magicians. And Lumpland's magician has died after they live a long time, but he's died. So from the land where wizards are schooled and trained, a new wizard is coming, and he doesn't make it to the city. And things and so these 2 rogues take advantage of that situation, but then as the series progresses, they gain consciences and begin to actually help the people of the city in exciting and dynamic and often magical ways. Then there's another character called Princess Terra, who is basically she's a princess and everyone knows she's a princess, but she really wants to do more. She's an adventurous and she likes sword fighting, and she's just this girl that has this second identity where she goes out as the Terror and takes part in like Fight Club. They have sword. Yeah, she is. They have sword fights in the street and stuff with people wagering, and she does that, and she has this sort of double life, and it's fun for her. And then as the threat to the city becomes a little bit more apparent, so she has to turn all her skills to helping her city, and the truth about that comes out with her father, the King Renald, and he has to come to terms with the fact that his little girl is a little badass. So that's the first arc, and then we have a fantastic second arc planned as well. So like I say, it's a series I'm really proud of. Jeff's art is amazing, and I'm glad you guys responded so favorably to it as well. I mean, that means a great deal. So thank you.
Oh, yeah, we've really enjoyed the preview that we got, and we are anxious for more. Absolutely looking forward to that. So if folks come into this and they are not familiar with your work, which boggles my mind, but it could happen.
Yeah.
When you were a wee young fella, how did you get into hey, comic books? I want to do that. What was your origin story?
Well, my origin story really was that I went to film school in England. I got a degree in filmmaking, and I was really young, and I thought, oh, I'm just going to walk into this career in films, and obviously that didn't happen. So as I was, making ends meet out of film school, I got a job at Titan Books, which is a British book company that at the time they still around now. They do lots of stuff. They're in the previews catalog and whatnot. I'm sure you guys order from them in your store. Yeah. But at the time, all they were doing was 2000 AD reprints of Judge Dredd and Strontium Dog and stuff like that, and some newspaper strips. And they'd begun to license like the first wave of Star Trek paperbacks that came out in the 80s. They were the original series. They weren't even the next generation. So it was a small group, and I began there as basically the office temp, cleaner upper, that emptying the bins and restocking the spray mount and stuff like that. And because they weren't the most generous people who paid money for, they didn't always get the top tier people doing the editing and the graphic design and stuff like that. So slowly, even though I was literally paid cash in hand as like an office temp, I went up I got promoted until I was the editor of the line within about 8 months of the reprint.
8 months.
Yeah, well, I mean, it
wow.
was one of those things. And in the course of that Titan Books, in tandem with a little like independent alternative publisher called Escape Comics, were going to do their first original graphic novel, was Violent Cases by Neil Gaiman and Dave McKean, which they published. And I was arrogant enough in my youth to think to myself, when I was at film school, I never wrote screenplays. It was all about directing and lighting and sound and everything, all the technical side. But in my youth, my arrogant youth, Neil Gaiman would come down with his Neil Gaimanness and his copy of Violent Cases, and I was like, I could do that. I can be as good as that. So but I realized to do that, you can't just like get an outline and send it in and hope someone finds you an artist. You've got to find one for yourself. And I was lucky enough to find an artist named Paul Johnson. And we came up with this idea. It was a sort of psychic murder mystery set in the Blitz during World War II called London's Dark. And that got published by Titan Books as their second original graphic novel. And so when I was trying to get back cover quotes from people, I got the black and white dummy copy to Matt Wagner and to Archie Goodwin, among other people. And that allowed that got me made contact with them, and I became very good friends with Matt Wagner. So by the time before London's Dark was even out, he had come into London rather, to a comic book convention, and he had decided at the time to take a break from doing Grendel, which was being published by Comico at the time. Is this too intricately boring? Or
not at all. This is exactly what we want to hear. We live for this stuff.
Okay.
Honestly, when you shut us up, that's when you should know that you're like telling us exactly what we want to hear.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you. So it was being published by Comico, and it was he wanted to take a break after issue 40, and he wanted me to write Grendel Tales, and then he was going to come back later with War Child. That was the plan. But and I wrote ultimately I did write Grendel Tales. It was the art was by a Danish artist called Teddy Christensen, who is still around. But back at Comico, when I first wrote it, 2.5 issues were drawn by Philip Bond, who's another artist. He did the Kill Your Boyfriend, and he's a British artist. He started in the Deadline magazine at the same time as Jamie Hewlett. We did Tank Girl, and then and he's done Kill Your Boyfriend. He's done stuff. I'm not sure if you're aware of his work, but he's a great artist. So he did 2.5 issues, which apparently are still in a storage place he has somewhere in London. And then Comico went out of business. And at the time, these independent comic book publishers like Comico and First and even Pacific, maybe, I'm not sure about Pacific, but when they were taking on projects, they were kind of taking a little bit of the ownership, the copyright. So they were sharing the copyright and the ownership with Matt, and Matt was in Portland. He was Diana Schutz's brother-in-law. She was the editor at Comico, and she went to Dark Horse. And it took like 2 years, but she managed to get Dark Horse to pay off Comico, got Dark Horse to pay off Comico, and then Matt kind of became the sole owner. So when it was time for him to start Grendel again, he said to me, James, he said, I can't relaunch Grendel after 2 years with your book. I have to do War Child first to reintroduce people to me as the creator of the series. But then we'll do Grendel Tales straight afterwards. So I did that, so I did that earlier, and they paid me for all of the. Did they pay me for all the scripts or just a couple? But anyway, I was paid and I was working, and I did like a Classics Illustrated, which never got published. Goethe's Faust, the whole Faust story that the Panda brothers were going to do, and First Comics went out of business. And I wrote 2 graphic novels for Crisis, which was a sort of graphic novel anthology that Fleetway were doing, where they would serialize a graphic novel in pieces, like 3 or 4 in one issue, and then release them as finished graphic novels when they were done. The only 2 that came out, there was a Hendrix biography and Dare, which was a Dan Dare, a kind of dark, re-realized Dan Dare by Grant Morrison. So I wrote 2 of those. Neither of those came out. So I was like doing a lot of work and no one was seeing any of it. But big important thing. In that time, I was offered a job working in a comic store, running a comic store in America by a friend of mine that owned it, who lived in England. So I came out to America and ended up getting married and staying in America. So I relocated, and that kind of allowed me to really make contact with American comic publishers in a way that I hadn't really been able to in England. And at the same time, I'd made friends with Archie Goodwin. Archie Goodwin was an epic at the time, and I did a book. He was just on the way out, but I did do a book called 67 Seconds for him, which with great art by Steve Yoel, a British artist, but it didn't sell well.
Out of curiosity, what was the comic book store you were working at? Because got to have a shout out to the old comic book shop.
Oh, well, it's long gone. It's now, the last time I drove past it was a bridal store for bridal gowns. So, but it was called Outer Limits, and it was the friend owned the Forbidden Planet, or co-owned the Forbidden Planet stores in.
Yeah, that's the big one there in
London.
the UK. Yeah,
but because of some legal whatever, one of the original partners had broken away, and he had the rights to the name Forbidden Planet in America, so it became Outer Limits. And I was there for a while, and then Archie Goodwin. This is a side story, but it's just an interesting one. He had done, if you guys remember, that beautiful Havoc and Wolverine painted graphic series.
Yes.
And he was trying to kind of bring like beautiful art to mainstream comics in a way. That was sort of what he aspired to do. And one of the yardsticks of that obviously was like Electric Assassin and some of the stuff that Sinkovich was doing at that time. But he was at a editorial meeting, and the book, by the way, the Havoc and Wolverine, had sold through the roof.
Yeah.
And everyone agreed when someone made this comment, which was, yeah, it sold great, but just imagine if we'd had one of our Marvel artists on it, completely missing the point of what this series was supposed to be. And he was like, that's it, I'm out. They just don't get it. So he moved over to DC.
Yes, he did.
And finally, he got me the Golden Age, and then Legends of the Dark Knight. We were, and then eventually Starman.
You did quite a few stories in Legends of the Dark Knight.
I did, yes.
And I loved Legends of the Dark Knight. It's one of those ones as a retailer, every collection that comes through with books from the late 80s, early 90s has all got Legends of the Dark Knight in it. And they don't sell for a whole lot, but I'm happy every time I see it because I love that. It just brings back a wave of memories. It's such a great series.
Yes.
The first 100 issues of that, in my opinion, is like some of the best Batman stories there are. Like I've got like 1 through 150 back there somewhere, and to this day I'll still pick through it. Mike Mignola did some covers, and I think you're great for it. And...
Well, one of the things about the book, I mean, it was just that Archie was the editor, and he knew how to edit. He knew how to. This is the way he would edit me with a story. For instance, if he would say, "Hey, James, why is this guy, this detective, look, we've got a big mustache and he looks like a Western character," and I would say, well, because you're going to find out he's the reincarnation of Scalp Hunter and blah 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 blah. But if this happened many times also, where he would go, "Why is blah blah blah," and I would say, "I don't really know. I just kind of," and he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna call you next week. You've got a week to think about why is this happening in the comic, and you work it out." He wasn't one of you get these editors that just want to like ram their own ideas down, and they're often editors that I found are frustrated writers themselves, but they're afraid to make that leap. They're either afraid of the financial ramifications, or they just don't have the balls to do it, but they feel they can write. I mean, that's a problem with being a writer, period. I think even prose or film or anything, everybody thinks they can write. Like people know that they can't light a movie, but they think they can write a screenplay. Everyone's written a note to their kid saying, "Bring back bread after school," or whatever. Everybody thinks they can write, so everyone has an opinion that they can do it better, and you have to ride that way. I'm so used to it, you have no idea, but I come across it all the time. So he was not like that, and he was just very encouraging. And he'd written enough himself. I mean, he created Vampirella. What hasn't he? You know, he's done so many things. He didn't need to prove anything. So it's always about encouraging other writers to bring their best work. When he did over and over, you're right. All those things. I think myself, all the other writers too, just did wonderful work with him.
That story really reminds me of something I read once. I don't remember if they interviewed Jeff Sell or Tim Sell or Jeff Loeb. One of them was talking about how Archie was instrumental in getting them together to do the Long Halloween, because before that they'd done some Halloween one shots in their style. Archie wanted them to expand it, so
yeah,
he kind of had a lunch like that where he like coerced them into it and explained. I don't know.
Well, that was Archie. That was Archie again, and I will add that Blades, which was the first time that Tim Sale did Batman, it was my first Legends of the Dark Knight. Denny O'Neil, who, like, it was a weird thing. Like back then at Marvel, at DC, you had editors that had these sort of fiefdoms. You had Mike Carlin, who was the Superman editor, right. Denny O'Neil, who was the Batman editor, and then you had someone else who was the other editor of the other books. That Archie slowly became that editor over time. He tried to transition into that role. But at that early juncture with Legends of the Dark Knight, even though Archie was editing the book, Denny O'Neil had kind of a little. He kept an eye on it and had a veto thing with it, where if there's something he didn't agree with, he could let Archie know. And he said categorically that Tim Sale was in no way a Batman artist, and he was like, no, this guy should not be doing the book.
Swing and a miss on that one, Denny.
Yeah, well, and Archie was like, dude, you just got to trust me. And, you know, it wasn't like a huge thing, but Archie just, you know, believed in Tim and got him the Blades series that I did. I had met Tim through Matt Wagner because he had done Grendel. So we were kind of in communication. And from there, yeah, Jeff Loeb came in with the Halloween and everything else. And again, that was Archie that, as you say, made that happen. So it's, you know, Archie's the best, or to this day. He's long gone, but I still always think of him.
Now, jumping back for just a second, going from the comic book scene in London and then moving over here to the comic book scene here, was there any drastic differences that you had to make adjustments to, or I mean, was it kind of pretty much the same, or, you know, could you talk about the differences between the two?
Yeah, well, I can. What do you mean, though? Do you mean in fandom, or do you mean
just say let's just say the industry in general. I mean, you could say fandom, even writing styles.
Well, yes and no. I'm not really. I mean, the thing is that at the time that I hadn't yet written my first comic, but I was obviously a fan of certain things, the obvious things. So this was an era when you had Frank Miller doing Daredevil. You had Alan Moore had done Warrior, Captain Britain, which is a great series if you ever get to read it, that he did. And then he just started doing Swamp Thing. Len Wein, you know, put him on Swamp Thing. So that, I don't want to call it adult comics, because that's what I love, that era, because that's what I aspired to with Starman. I think I've said that in the past interviews, was how they were more adult, but they weren't like Vertigo books where suddenly it's everything's explicit and it's like, it definitely books that are only for adults. So you had all that coming up, and then there were other things. You know, Love and Rockets was just starting. Howard Chaykin was doing American Flag. There was, you know, Grendel. There was sort of these independent books at the same time that were still comic books. So all of this was what I was studying, and then there was, you know, 2000 AD, which I didn't. It took me years until I worked for that company, but at least as a writer. But that was going on too. So there was a little bit of a different feel, but it had already begun to permeate America. So when I started writing, I didn't have to kind of adjust my style. It was more that I was sort of coming in at just the right time as comic book writing was beginning to kind of shift more into that kind of direction. In terms of fandom, well, I mean, honestly, and this sounds a little heartless, but British fandom was kind of back then. I mean, it's all kind of evened out now. It's an even playing field. But back then, English fandom was a bit cooler than in America. Like the cliche of like guys that couldn't get girls and obsessed about comics and didn't go out to concerts or do any kind of, you know, go and see sports and get in a fist fights on a Saturday night in the pub and all that. That's that. In England, we did all that, and we enjoyed comics. It was much more accepted. You were allowed to read comics and have a girlfriend. And I know that sounds a little bit like mean, but back in the day, it was comics were anyone old enough will have to admit that when you went to comic book conventions and comic marts, and it was not the way it is now. There was, I mean, apart from cosplay and all of that, it's just more integrated into our literary society now, comics, I think. And back then it was much more secular in America. And it was for many years, even when I arrived in America. It slowly got out of that. You know, the movies helped, Batman and, Michael Keaton, Batman and some things like that. But it was still off in the sidelines a little more than it ever was in England.
Yeah, we all lived through that.
Absolutely.
So, and I hope I'm not offending anybody. I mean,
Not
No,
at
no,
all.
no,
That's
no, no.
exactly how it was.
We know exactly what you're talking about.
Hey, I'm Gen X. You offend anybody you want to offend. I'm here for it. I love it.
Okay, good. I mean, I actually arrived in America New Year's Eve 1988. So 1989 was the first year I was in America, and I went to San Diego Comic Convention that whenever it was, August, September of 89. And it was the last comic convention in the old building, which was, for people who've never been to San Diego, it's meaningless for me to start describing roads, but it was in a different part. It was in a different part of the town, behind a big hotel called the Westgate. If the city goes in a slope towards the sea, because the convention center is on the water, this was further back. And I remember two things about that. One was I walked into this convention and thought, oh my God, this is the biggest convention I've ever seen. And clearly it wasn't. But also that it even then had that kind of more fanboy mentality. And the following year was the first year at the convention center. And they needed so little space that they had 1/4 of it. And then they had these giant, what are they called? Big scrims, big curtains that they have them still, but they could divide off the convention center into 4 if they chose to. So they had 1, and then the rest of it was just nothing, blackness. And I remember being there and going through the curtain and seeing how far I could walk into this. It was blackness, like death. And I kept walking and walking and walking. And to the point where I look back and the little gap of light that I made in the curtain was so small. It was like, heaven, or, you're in this pit of death, and there's the light, that I got freaked out and had to go running back to the light. And then that first year, it was still very comic booky. There was a section where there were all of the dealers with their original artwork. People were still doing sketches for free. Just, that was just part of what they did. They didn't charge. It was a very different place. And then the following year, and I thought to myself, they will never fill this place. It's too big. And then the following year, which would be 91, they got as far as doing halfway. And then the final year, they did the whole thing. And they're off to the races. So the reason I'm telling you this story is because I feel, remembering that now, I can almost feel the transition from the old kind of comic book fans and the old kind of comic book conventions into, it slowly became this more universal media thing with San Diego Comic Convention and some other conventions too. To the point now where people, I'm sure you guys who remember those days, because they were great. They were actually kind of more fun than they are now.
Agreed.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That's why Heroes Con, they always professionals always want to go to Heroes Con because it feels like
it's a true comic convention.
Yeah. But those years, I remember seeing the shift from one to the other in at the time the biggest convention in America. Okay, another long rambling story from me.
It was good.
Yeah, we're living for this. So with Archie going to DC and getting started, kind of going into the Batman stuff and all this kind of thing, and then you talk about, and I think this is important, the kind of switch to more mature stories and mature story lines, and those being a market that people are interested in. It seemed kind of like a ripe opportunity for Starman.
Well,
how did you come up with this as this concept that you wanted to pitch? I mean, where was the genesis of that? Because I know there's 4 people sitting over here on the side of this who are really curious about that.
Well, the genesis is that I wanted to make a name for myself in comics, and I noticed that a way to do it, and also bear in mind that this is a different world than it is now, where a lot of these books that I'm talking about, and I include Starman in this, might not have succeeded now because of the internet and everything else. Mm-hmm. Back then, comics had more of a shot of surviving because there was more sales. That helps, obviously. But also, people weren't so quick to criticize the work. Like I used to, if you remember, if you were reading Starman at the time, I would answer the letters page for a long time, and I had to stop after a few years because it took so long to do it, because I would care about every one of these letters. Because it's one thing to go on Twitter or whatever and say James Robinson sucks or Garth Ennis is crap. That's easy. It's easy to be mean when all it takes is 2 seconds on a computer. But when you've got to write a letter and mail it and put it in walk to the mailbox and all of that,
you have to really mean it.
You have to really mean it. So as a result, people didn't waste their time just being mean. If there was criticism, it tended to be criticism that came from a point of wanting to like help or give their opinion or just there was more care given. So anyway, with that said, the books, what happened was, Alan Moore was doing Swamp Thing. This stuff was happening. Batman Year One, Frank Miller was doing his work, beginning to, that was a part of it. And comics were coming a little bit, in places, a little bit grimmer. And then, Karen Berger was editing Sandman.
Oh, yeah.
Well, wait, no. She was a DC editor, and she hadn't found Alan Moore. That was Len Wein. And she hadn't found Garth Ennis. That was Bob Greenberger that gave him Doom Patrol. But she kind of co-opted those guys, and she was editing them. She edited Animal Man. I think she took over editing Alan Moore, and she had Sandman, which was a DC book at the time. And you remember issue 6 had Martian Manhunter in it and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And then from there, she kind of talked Paul Levitz into doing a more adult line, which was Vertigo. I think that if I remember correctly, Sandman was just ending. Sandman I don't think was ever a Vertigo book. It was always, I think the trades were.
Yeah, it was printed later under Vertigo.
The comic books were DC. So
and Animal Man switched over in issue 5.
Did it? Okay.
Yeah, Animal Man was issue 5 on the switch.
Issue 5? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, when that happened, and I went up there to the offices, and I sort of got this feeling with the Vertigo editors at the time. They kind of felt like they were doing this art, and everybody that was doing Superman and Justice League were like just doing shit, and they had the floor above. You had DC, and then you had Vertigo at the floor above it. This is in the original building. And I likened it a little bit, if you've read The Time Machine, the H.G. Wells novel, about like that they thought of themselves as the Eloi, and you had the Morlocks like stoking the furnaces underneath. And it really irked me a bit. And I felt that with Vertigo becoming more mature, the other book, the mainstream stuff was becoming a little bit more comic booky again.
Yeah.
And that cool middle ground that Frank Miller and Matt Wagner and Alan Moore and all those people did was getting lost. So I really wanted to do that with Starman, was to bring that sensibility to the DC line. Now, at the same time, sorry, I was going to say this part. I think I might have got slightly sidetracked. I was trying to make, and I noticed that like Daredevil, when Frank Miller took it over, was bi-monthly. It was on the verge of getting cancelled.
Mm-hmm.
And he brought it, and that's why in those first Marvel books, when he first started Daredevil, there used to be ads for a coming Frank Miller Doctor Strange book. Do you remember those that one-page ad by Frank Miller?
Yep.
Mhm.
And then because Daredevil took off and it became a monthly book, because Doctor Strange was bi-monthly too, so he was going to do a book a month and go back and forth. So that's why that didn't happen, and he kind of turned Daredevil into something again, and then. Again with Swamp Thing, that was on the way out when Len Wein offered it to Alan Moore. Doom Patrol, no one gave a shit cared about when Grant Morrison took over, and then something like Animal Man was just completely unknown. No one knew who that character was. He'd only had like six appearances originally, and Forgotten Heroes, a couple of appearances in Action Comics. So. That's what I wanted to do, was like find an obscure character and make them into something. And actually, I kind of had pieces of what I wanted to do, and I was offered by Bobby Chase, God help me, Doc Samson over at Marvel. And I had I had this idea, like really making it like trippy and the mental stuff and psychoanalysis, and then I thought the perfect like roguish villain, but easier villain, would be the ringmaster from the Circus of Crime. And I had all these ideas and time travel where Doc Samson gets trapped in Bedlam in the Victorian times, and all the kind of stuff that I would write. And Bobby Chase was like, no, we don't want this. We want him fighting the Abomination. Basically just another shitty Hulk book. So, but
I would pay to read a book of Doc Samson trapped in Bedlam.
Yeah,
well,
like I want to read that right now.
So I mean, and it came out of me doing, actually the first time I ever worked with Tony Harris was in the back of a Hulk annual. I think it was Hulk annual 11 maybe, or 7, and it was a small Doc Samson story that I think it was Joe Phillips who was part of Gaijin Studios when Tony Harris was too. He did the art, I think. I can't remember now, but Tony inked it. So that was the first time we worked together. So that's why they wanted me to do Doc Samson, and then I didn't want to do the obvious crap. So but all those ideas and the sensibility and the feeling I began to put together into Starman, and then I realized at the same time that, because there had been a lot of attempts to do Starman, but I saw that the reason I felt that perhaps why they never really caught hold is there was never a sense of lineage. And you have, the idea of Barry Allen hanging out with Jay Garrett or Hal Jordan and Alan Scott. There's even, Al Pratt was hanging out with Ray Palmer. And then there were the Justice Society crossovers. But there was never that sense of a passing of the baton, and almost a pun because of the cosmic rod, between Ted Knight and the next guy. And then there was sort of an attempt at that by Roger Stern in the Will Payton Sandman, because he did invent or bring in David Knight, but then he probably destroyed the cosmic rod, and David Knight was no longer David Knight, and Ted Knight was off in Valhalla with the Justice Society fighting Norse gods. That was how Roy Thomas left them. So, without wishing to be mean, for whatever reason, that Will Payton Starman didn't register with people. I mean, it lasted like 40 issues, which by today's standards would be incredible. But back then, people just didn't like the character. So I kind of knew it was going to get cancelled. And I told this to Archie, and I said, when it's cancelled, can we get this character? And I've got these ideas. And so he came through for me. He got the character. But he got it almost immediately after the cancellation. I think at the time they killed off Will Payton in the Eclipso crossover story. Darkness Rising or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I have not rehearsed any of this. I'm amazed the shit that's in my brain that I remember.
This is why we're sitting here just quiet and in rapt attention, because this is
So
all the stuff that's right in our wheelhouse.
So he'd killed him off. So Mike, what is interesting also is that Mike Carlin was wary. And so when you start a new book, even if one person was in charge of it, all three editors kind of had to sign off on it. And normally it wasn't a big deal. And Denny O'Neil, I don't think cared one way or the other. But Mike was like, you know what? I'm not sure that this is going to work. So originally, Starman, Jack Knight, was going to be a 4-issue miniseries.
Oh, no.
And that is why at the end of issue 3, because it has a zero number, because of 0 hour, it ended with like, oh, Will Payton's alive, and so's the blue Michael Thomas Starman's in a freak show in a circus. I just wanted to leave it with as much, oh my God, that hopefully we'd get an ongoing series from it. And then 2 things happened. One is, what's interesting, 0 hour, Starman did not come out of 0 hour. Starman was already like 2 issues drawn when 0 hour was decided on. But because it was coming out then, they said, well, can we kind of just, I mean, if you look at Starman and 0 hour, it's very tenuous, the linking launch, because it was done after the fact. And so issue 1, what should have been issue 1 became issue 0, and then what would have been the final issue became issue 3. But after Mike Carlin had seen like 2 issues of it being drawn and the story and everything else, he said to Archie, you know what, I take back what I said, let's just go with an ongoing book instead. So it became an ongoing book, mid mini series, I guess. And then the other thing that happened was that Tony was never really ever capable, has never been capable of doing 12 issues a year. And even, most artists, they can't even, you're doing backflips with joy if you can find an artist that can do 10 issues a year. So one of the things that I always hated about fill-in issues was that the art, even if it's great art, it kind of is a little bit of a slap in the face. It draws you out of the story. So what I pitched to Archie was, I'd come up with these times past that the Shade was telling, and it would be a way of telling the past of Ted Knight, of Opal City, of sundry other characters. And he was, I mean, this is Archie. He's like, that sounds great. He always wanted to do cool stuff. And then the other thing that I was really great at is he trusted me so well. We had such a good relationship that I would say, hey, there's this artist, Teddy Christensen. Can we use him? And I would always suggest these guys. He'd be like, yeah, sure, why not? And I think as a run of fill-in issues by artists, I don't think there's any that consistently was good as Starman in terms of the artists we found. And it helped me to fill in all these back points in the story. I got to kill off Swamp. I got to work with Russ Heath. I worked with him twice, but I got to kill off Swamp Thing with Russ Heath. I got Craig Hamilton to do a couple of issues. God, it was very hard. I mean, he's not the most prolific guy, but we got work out of him. Various other people. I mean, it was that was another aspect of it that I'm proud of, and
it was a fantastic way to do it. I love Times Past.
Yeah, I just love how I don't have the words for it. I don't have the vocabulary to describe it, but just the talk, like how it goes from one story to like an issue of talking with David in the dreams, and then it goes into like a Shade's journal or a Times Past, or just there's so many little facets to the totality of the run.
Well, and thank you for that. And I'll add about talking with David, because I've actually forgotten when I first came up with that idea.
I think that's amazing. Like that issue 5 is the one that like drew me in, and I was like, okay, I'm hooked.
Good. Well, and that was also when Tony's art kind of took a notch up too. I think everything came together with that issue to propel it forward. But it's interesting how I think it was Neil Gaiman that said this about Sandman, that when you're planning one of these big opuses that go on and on and on, the reader can assume that you've worked out every little piece of it ahead of time. And Neil said it's about sort of 60-40. You've got a lot of it worked out, and then other things just fall into place. And you're like, oh, that works. And it makes you look like a genius, but it isn't always the plan. So talking with David was an idea I had, and it was meant to be a one-off. And then I forget who had the idea. I don't want to say it was Tony, but it might have been. It might have been me. It might have been Archie. But someone had the idea of it being all black and white with just David in color, which I think helped it to stand out. No one had tried.
It was amazing.
That. And then slowly, it was such a good idea that it became every year, and I did one every year until the final. Like it was almost a 3-parter really, with talking with David.
Like, there's a lot of emotion throughout the whole run, but for me, like the talking with David issues are just, man, they hit so hard.
Well,
especially like the one where he meets his mother at the end.
Was
yes, thank you. Again, I mean, I was trying. Yes, definitely trying for everything that you got. I mean, I appreciate the fact that it actually resonated. But I also think that emotion in comics is really what you remember more than a lot of the intricacies of plots.
Yes.
And so I in fact, there was a story I was telling the other day. I was gonna co-write a book with a big name writer, brighter artist, and we were gearing up. It was going to be for DC, and then he said, "Just let's be clear, character doesn't matter. It's all about plot." And I remember thinking, I can't work with this guy. And then I went back and looked at all his work, and I realized that was what was missing from a lot of his stories, is heart. So I really tried to put that in. I mean, I knew from the very first issue practically that Jack was not going to say "I love you" to his father until that final issue, and he does. He never says it throughout the entire run of the book. And that was always a deliberate thing, so it had as much emotion as possible. And killing off Ted, I thought I did a pretty good job of that. There was so many, like they had just done. Was it not? Oh, I forget the name.
Underworld Unleashed.
No, the one where they kill off all the Justice Society, or not all of them, but some of them get old and die.
That was 0 Hour, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Was it 0 Hour?
Yeah, 0 Hours where like Our Man dies and the original Adam die.
That's right.
I think Dr. Midnight.
3 of them. Yeah, Dr. Midnight. That's who it was. I was trying to think of who the third one was.
They were so, and that's why I put them in that talking with not talking with David, Times Past, where they are still the Justice Society. That was me giving them partly a nice send off, and then the other one was the talking with David, where they all have dinner together and he meets all the Justice.
I love that one.
That was me trying to honor those guys because they had been given such a shitty send off, and I knew that if Ted Knight was going to be an old man, at some point someone was going to kill him off, and I did not want it to be another shitty death. So I thought if I'm going to do it, so I planned that all the way through to the very end, from the very beginning. But then there's other things that I just made up on the fly that somehow looked like I'd planned them all along. So I was kind of lucky, and I'd also learned how to write. You kind of learn to write the more you write. So I learned how to weave new ideas in with old ideas and stuff like that.
Like,
fellas, I've been up since 1:30 this morning, and
oh my gosh,
I would love to keep hanging out here. Before I go, James, I just I want you to know what a big influence you've been on just my overall fandom. Starman came at a time when I was kind of getting back into comics. I had just gotten married, and my wife kind of gave me grief about comics, and I told her about Starman, and I explained it to her. She read the entire run.
Oh wow!
And she loved it.
That's good. Well, good.
But I was a big fan of Leave It to Chance. Starman was very important to me. I read your run on Justice League of America when you did that. I think you're amazing, and
thank you. Justice League had a lot of editorial interference, and it irks me a little bit because I know how good it could have been. And if you ever read the last issue where I basically plotted out all of the stories I was going to tell that I never got to tell, I don't know if you ever read that issue, but
I'm sure I did.
it just I'm very happy that you enjoyed the series. I wish you had read the series that I had in mind.
Yeah, I had a conversation with Mark Bagley, and he said similar things. He was like, I thought I was coming on for this thing, and then this happened, and so
yeah, he was a good sport. He definitely was enticed over to DC and then was not given the assignments he thought he was going to be getting. Absolutely.
right.
But I will say I have lots. Apart from Rose Kingdom, I have a lot of new stuff coming down the pipe with really good artists. So, and some of them hopefully will you'll enjoy them the way that you enjoyed Starman. So, I kind of have been away for a while. I was working on the Stargirl TV show, but I'm really kind of bringing a lot of energy back to all these ideas. And in the next year there'll be announcements, and I hope you like them as much as Leave It to Chance.
Oh, absolutely, sir. I'm on board for anything you do. And it was
Lovely.
a pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure talking to you too, Damon. Thank you very much. And to give my regards, are you still married?
Absolutely.
Well, please give my regards to your wife.
Yeah, 25 years this year. So.
Oh, congratulations! That's
Holy
wonderful.
smokes! It has been 25 years, hasn't it?
I know, it's crazy. Isn't
Oh
it?
my god!
This silver wedding anniversary.
I'm sorry.
Is that a silver wedding?
I think that's right.
Okay, well then, there are those silver laminated comic books from the. You get one of those.
There you go. That
See,
sounds
that's
like
the
a good
perfect
plan.
It's the perfect gift.
Anyway, yes, yeah. So I take it you are getting off now, Damon.
I am, sir.
Okay. Well then, wonderful to talk to you, and I'm glad you've enjoyed my work and followed it for as long as you have.
Yes, sir. Thank you for all you do. Have a good one.
Thanks.
Gentlemen, be good.
All right,
Yeah.
Damon, glad you're able to jump on.
Yes, sir.
You talked about the Stargirl show. That reminded me of something I wanted to ask you about. I would hope you have information about it. I think it was in 2014. There was an announcement for that DC was going to do a reality competition show, like a web show, and the contestants were supposed to work on a film treatment for Starman. Now, it never came to fruition. It was just some kind of an announcement with some kind of a stream production company, but I never heard like another big announcement about it. Because shortly after that's when they announced DC Universe, and of course that led into like the creation of the Stargirl show.
Well, I never heard anything about that. I would have been pissed off, honestly, if I heard that.
Yeah, like Jeff Johns' name was attached to it, but like I said, I only saw like an initial announcement about it, and then nothing else.
Right.
I was always curious about it.
Well, the problem is that they're actually one of the. I don't know anything about that, honestly. I'm glad it didn't happen. Would have been a shit show, because both figuratively and literally, I guess. Because part of Starman is basically comes from me. Like, if someone else wrote Jack Knight, it wouldn't be Jack Knight. It would be
I wholeheartedly agree.
A guy that looked like Jack Knight, but you can't. The character is too personal, and I'm very grateful that they haven't done anything with him. And quite honestly, the way that Starman has always gone from one version to the next, I think what they should do if they bring back Starman is like tell somebody to create their Starman, and bring their personality and their the things that interest them and all of that into that character, and not just like fuck up Jack Knight. No. I think excuse my language. I think I believe, although Tony and I have first refusal on working with Jack Knight again, which is funny. So in theory, legally, they can't do Starman or Jack Knight unless we are offered to do it first. Now, Warner Brothers lawyers are shifty fellows, so you never know what they're going to actually do. But what's interesting is that Tony and I came up with an idea for if you remember the series, when people come out of the poster demon, which is I think issue.
Oh yeah, 6 and 7.
Yeah, hang on. What?
Or no, 6 and 7 is the carnival.
So it was
I know
whenever that happened,
Yeah.
and then the issue after them coming out the poster demon. From that issue on until the very end, there really isn't a space. It's almost like one narrative that keeps going. And I don't want to bring Jack back. He kind of is he has that retirement, he has that life, and but there was this period where he could have had an adventure, and I came up with this idea with tattoos in Japan and stuff like that, which is all stuff that Tony Harris has a huge interest in.
Yes, he does.
So I came up with a story. It's a 5 or 6 part story in Japan. I've written it all out, the outline for it. And Tony's done art. And we tried to interest DC, this is in the last 2 years, in doing it. And they have no interest in it.
No.
So, yeah, they're not interested in doing Jack Knight Starman, even as a black label. They're just, they're off doing yet another Batman and the Joker story.
Yeah, I was going to say in April of last year, 38% of all books published by DC in April of last year were Batman related. 38%.
Yeah.
Insane. Absolutely insane.
Well, the thing, and I was saying this to someone recently, one of the things that I reached that point in my life, and I'm not saying that there aren't great writers writing Batman as we speak, or Spider-Man as we speak, but I've just read enough of those stories. I don't need to read Batman fighting the Joker or any of that. And I'm not saying that someone else can't enjoy that. I'm not judging anybody, but personally, it's gone on too long for me. I still love comics, but I like fresh. I love Ed Brubaker. I love no, I can't see anything that I'm reading, but there's nothing but Ed Brubaker. But
hey, you can't go wrong with Ed Brubaker.
No, he's great.
That dude is amazing.
But just to stuff that it seems fresh, and I've just read enough Joker books. I don't need another one. And the other thing that I think is a problem, or not a problem, but something I don't enjoy is back when I was reading comics, back in those early days, like Iron Man's Demon in a Bottle.
Yes.
That was a fantastic run on Iron Man, and that existed only in the Iron Man book. The same with the Daredevil run. With all these books, they kind of existed in their own world, and then they would cross over a little bit, and that made it special.
That's exactly what I was about to bring up was about Starman. It's the world you built as a whole. It's amazing, and it's so self-contained, and it only touches the other parts of the DC universe very, very briefly at times.
Yeah, well, that was my intention.
It was great.
When there were crossovers, I did do it, but I was very oblique or vague about it. It's just so that the book stayed true to itself. But I think now, both at Marvel and DC, from what I can see, it's like it's just a constant crossover.
Everything's connected, yeah.
And so nothing can stand out in its own right. And obviously you get a Tom King thing that's fantastic. The Vision, these things can come through and be done.
Yeah.
But
part of what you talked about earlier about plot versus character,
yes,
has been a problem with comics for a while now, and I will say DC is starting to work their way out of that. Tom Taylor's Nightwing is spectacular. He's also writing Titans, which is great. Chip Zdarsky on Batman he's writing that ship. He's doing a good job there. Tom King's new take on Wonder Woman, the first 2 issues are out. That's fantastic. Cy Spurrier's writing Flash now, and that's fantastic. And I've never been a Flash fan of any stripe. So for me to say I'm really digging what they're doing on Flash is a big step. Marvel hasn't caught up to that yet at a certain level. What should be their flagship titles, Spider-Man, X-Men, are just throwing things at a wall to see what sticks. There's no
Right.
character, there's no heart, there's no development. But some of the titles that are flying under the radar for Marvel do have that. Moon Knight right now, Miles Morales, Spider-Man is what Peter Parker should be and currently is not. Fantastic Four by Ryan North is excellent. And then the Scarlet Witch currently has a really interesting ongoing series that's told through a series of one-shots, which I really appreciate. Each issue is self-contained
Yeah.
and has its own story.
No one's thought to do that before with the Scarlet Witch, huh? Do single issue one shots.
Yeah. But it's good. They're all connected through this interesting idea.
That was a joke based on my.
Yeah.
I got your joke.
Yeah.
So something that you wrote in the early 2000s that I enjoyed immensely for some reason. I don't know why I enjoyed it so much, but the ending of it really sent my imagination running wild. And that was the movie, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Okay.
The way the movie ended with Alan Quartermain's hand coming up out of the grave, do you think you got like one more Alan Quartermain adventure for us?
Well, there's a lot. You want to hear the whole League of Extraordinary Gentlemen story? I can tell you that.
Oh, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I know that was like a whole ordeal somehow.
But then you have to tell us about Firearm.
Okay, well, I can do that in a minute. So the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, I was hired. I was working in films by that point, and comics, and the way that films are done with the studios is you work with a creative executive that you get on with, or you have some creative communication, and then they tell their boss, we want to hire James on a movie, or whoever on a movie, and you write the script, and then it kind of goes up the chain, and sometimes they get interested in it. So I wrote a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and they wanted like a summer movie, and I was like, I said to them at the time, I said, look, have you read the comic? I mean, the perfect way to do that book would have been like a Doctor Who type BBC dark, or what's that, Dr. Morell and Mr. Strange, that series, very.
Yes, Dr. Norrell and Mr. Strange. Yeah.
So something like that with like second-rate effects, but really good British character actors. There's no one pretty in a Kevin O'Neill comic.
No, that's true.
So they wanted something else, and I really, really, really wanted to. Oh, and then the other thing was when I was hired to do it, they had only done the first arc, the first series of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Now, if you look at that series, it takes Alan Moore 4 issues to recruit the League.
Mm-hmm.
The actual plot is the last 2 issues.
Yep.
So when you do a movie, all of that recruiting and everything else has to be done within the first 30 pages, the first arc, and then you have the plot begins to get bigger and bigger, and then you have a end of the third act, end of the second act when things look darkest, and then you have the resolution. So I didn't have any of that to work off, so I had to kind of create my own adventure, and I came up with this. And also I couldn't use like the main villain in League was Fu Manchu, and I couldn't use him because it was deemed, racially insensitive. So I came up with a new villain that sort of was a prototype, like a Prussian prototype Nazi, and because like building up to World War I and all of that stuff. So I came up with this idea, and it all took place in New York's kind of Hell's Kitchen in the turn of the century, and there was flesh-eating virus and all this cool stuff. And it became more real as a comic, as a film. But the head of Fox said, "Look, the star of this movie is an old man. There are 2 older actors that could play this role, and just so you know, if they both say no, it's dead." So the 2 actors, one of them was Sean Connery, and the other one was Anthony Hopkins. So they read it. They gave it to Sean Connery. Sean Connery loved it. This version in New York that no one has ever seen, but you have to just trust me. It's a really good script. And so everything was going forward, and me and no, actually, did the director was the director on at this point? Maybe the director wasn't on yet, but anyway, 9/11 happened, and my the villain's death ray, so to speak. I was thinking about what worked in Victorian times that still resonated in the present. They wanted that, something that resonated in the present. And I was like, well, you can't have flying stuff. You could have balloons and dirigibles, but you can't really have like jets and stuff like that. Atom bombs and splitting the atom. It's too much in the 20th century. And then I began to think that the first use of germ warfare was in the American Civil War. And then in the First World War, there was mustard gas. So it was around. There was stuff like that was around at the turn of the century. And then also at the time, there had been an incident, the first time I ever was aware of it, in Burbank, which was actually near where I lived at the time, of flesh-eating bacteria, where this woman lost her feet or her hands or something awful. And they actually used that in an episode of X-Files, taking that from reality. So I created like a sort of a flesh-eating bomb that stripped people to skeletons, that was bacterial and everything else. And the plan was to let it off in New York using the subway systems, which were the tunnels were all built by the turn of the century. They hadn't put the rails in and they hadn't made them nice, but all those tunnels were built. So that was the plan, and that's what they have to ultimately stop when they work it all out in the end. So everything was fine, and then 9/11 happened. And they're like, well, we can't do any of this. So, I mean, now there's been like there's so many terrorist movies nowadays, isn't there? But at the time of 9/11, everybody was very scared. And they didn't know if there was going to be an attack in 2 weeks. They didn't know when the next thing was going to happen. And ultimately, there really wasn't one. But from their perspective, they didn't want to spend $100 million on a movie that they couldn't release because something again. Oh, and there's in Japan that sarin gas attack.
Sarin gas, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
on the subways, yep.
So they were like, we don't want that happening on the New York subway just as we're releasing this. So but at the same time, Sean Connery wanted to do the movie. So there's no way that a movie where Sean Connery says, I want to do a movie, there's no way that they're going to say we're not doing it.
Right.
So then I was told to come up with a whole new idea. The only bit of the original movie that still is in it is when Connery's recruited and you think it's the other actor, and he pulls up, takes the gun and shoots the guy from far away, and there's a big fight in the colonial club with the old hunters. Everything else was all rewritten, and the problem is that when you're working with a creative executive, it's basically the pair of you. And the minute a 100-pound, 800-pound gorilla like Connery says, I'm going to do the movie, everybody, all these people that I didn't even know were even producers on the film, step out, and they all want to get involved, and they all have opinions, and it becomes this big old mess. So as a result, the movie, I love people saying they love the movie because at the time, it was so much not what I originally intended that I find it sometimes hard to come to terms with it. On top of which, Steve Norrington, the director, nice enough guy in his own way, a bit crazy, but most directors are. But he had this whole idea that he didn't want to even look. I don't think he even looked at the comic ever. He certainly didn't get. When I wrote the original draft of my league, I think my description of the Nautilus is as close to how Kevin O'Neill drew that vessel as anybody could possibly do. And he just wanted the Nautilus to look like his idea. Everything was his idea. And so as a result, there was a visual side to it that I wish was there too, a dirtier, more Kevin O'Neill feel that I think got lost. So that's the negatives, but I'm glad you liked it. The actors, I went to Prague and hung out with the actors and hung out with Connery in the mornings. And the director didn't really want to work with the actors, so I would often talk to Connery about lines.
Isn't that the director's entire job?
Well, he's just a strange fellow. I mean, yes, it is. It's part of your job. A good director. If an actor is lost, he should be able to do a line reading. He should be able to tell him how to do that line.
Yeah.
Wasn't that his last film? The last film he directed?
Connery?
Yeah.
No, the director. I think that was.
Yes, he basically.
He never directed a movie after that.
No, I mean he was offered them, he just had one of those contrarian, or it has. I'm sure he's doing something out there in the world. And again, a very nice fellow, but I felt like he was his own worst enemy. He was always like, League was the last movie he directed, sorry, but he was up for like Akira, Clash of the Titans, or something like that. There was a lot of big movies that he was in the running for, and then he just, or not in the running for, that he was going to do, and then suddenly he wasn't. So he just kind of talked himself out of stuff and alienated people, and had a very erratic personality. Very, very talented guy, but I think also his own worst enemy at times.
See, I wanted an Alan Quartermain sequel so bad.
Sorry, let me get to that. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. So at the time that we did that, Alan, we didn't know if people would like the movie, you know, what the reaction. The movie could have been a blockbuster and there would have been a sequel. So there were two ideas we were gonna do. One was, well, these ideas I kind of came up with, honestly. There's no we. One was that like the League would get recruited again by a new. So I came up with this idea. I wanted to do like the grandson of Man Friday from Robinson Crusoe, who Friday comes back to England. So in 2 generations, you know, Crusoe's given him a college education, this grandson, and so he's like a Black Victorian James Bond. So he basically would recruit the League.
Love it.
So he would basically recruit well, you might see that in an idea I'm going to be doing soon. So just, if you like the idea, I'm glad.
I do. I'm hooked.
So he was going to recruit the League without Quartermain to track down Quartermain, and it was sort of going to be in the Amazon jungle, and it was going to be kind of like Apocalypse Now, where Quartermain had mobilized the natives of the Amazon. And at first you think he's insane and everything else, and then you realize that there's a greater evil that he's actually working to prevent, and the League would side with him. So that was one idea. The other idea that we had, and it depended on getting another actor, but was that we would start the movie, and bear in mind this particular actor is Scottish, but he does English accents. So it would be this like pompous, timid young man who was like a bureaucrat who's sent out from England to Africa, and he goes on a safari, and he's like nervous, but he's also mean to the native people helping him. He's like a bit of an asshole, and he would get attacked by a lion or some angry charging animal. And we would cut back to the funeral of Alan Quartermain, and it would cut between the two. And as the hand comes out, it would kind of go back in, and you think, oh, it didn't work. But at the same time, you'd kind of see this younger guy get killed by the animal with the English accent guy, and then suddenly we were going to hopefully trying to get Ewan McGregor, and then suddenly he'd be Scottish, and he would be a young Alan Quartermain.
That would have been awesome.
Oh man!
And he has to convince everybody, no, I'm really Alan Quartermain. Meanwhile, the Martian, we're going to do the Martian invasion. So, and one of the things that Alan Moore did, which surprised me. I mean, he wanted to write the story he wanted to write. I can't fault him, but it's clear that he kind of got bored with them pretty quickly with that second arc, killed them all off, and then jumped ahead to the next era. So. Whereas, you know, so this would have not had that. It would have been more of a thing. But yeah, the Martians with this younger Quartermain trying to be the leader when they didn't believe he was even Quartermain. They thought he was like some lunatic. So
thought one of the interesting elements of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen movie was the introduction of the Tom Sawyer character.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, I thought that was really well done.
Well, that was him. That was him. Not him. That was 20th Century Fox wanting a young actor in the role. And they were talking about Freddie Prinze Jr. Well, I mean, I have nothing to say about that. You know, at the time he'd done those. I know he did Last Summers, and he was, you know, had a bit more name. And then as time went on, it became Shane West ultimately played the role. There were lots of actors that were funnily enough, because the director shot down a lot of actors for those roles that I was like, really? Not him? One of them was Orlando Bloom. Orlando Bloom was almost Tom Sawyer, and the director was like, no, I don't want him. And then obviously Orlando Bloom was like, oh, fuck, screw you. I'm going to go off and do Pirates of the Caribbean then. Which so good for Orlando.
Yeah.
But wait a minute, where was I going with this? I've lost my train of thought. What was I saying?
West. You were talking about how he shot the director shot down actors.
So he was brought in the character to accommodate that young role, and I remember reading an interview with Alan Moore, who I'm sure would have nothing but contempt for me. But he
well, you would be in good company.
He would talk. He pointed out, and I knew this, that if you were true to the ages, Tom Sawyer took place at an earlier time, and he would be an old man by the turn of the century.
Yeah. And
my reasoning was it's a comic book movie, and Mark Twain himself, because there's Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn, then there's Innocents Abroad. I think there's one Tom Sawyer, Boy Detective. There's 5 or 6 Tom Sawyer books, and he never ages. So I consider him a bit like, Spider-Man or a comic book character. I felt
a bit of a Peter Pan, yeah.
Yeah, I felt at liberty I could play around with his age. The reviews of the movie weren't particularly good, and I remember one bit that there's always that review that sticks in your craw, like you can't. There's a pretty well-known film critic called Manola Dargis, and in the course of writing it, in the course of filming it, Tom Sawyer says "whoa" at one point, like "whoa, that's big," and she did not like the fact that he used that "whoa" and thought it was lazy writing, and said James Robinson should never be allowed to work in films ever again. That's in her review.
Wow.
Which I found very disappointing, mainly because it showed that this well-known critic has no idea how films are made, because a line can come into a movie, and I don't think I wrote that line, honestly. It was either ad-libbed or it was thrown in by the director or something, but lines get changed all the time, and things get thrown in all the time, and an actor will get an idea for a line, and if an actor has enough enough say in the making the movie, that line's going in. So for her to make that comment and not take into account that maybe I didn't write that line to begin with, shows you that these people that reviewing movies, often they don't really understand how movies are made or who's doing what. So, and it makes their opinion a little bit less important to me, really, now.
Oh yeah.
Was Dorian Gray part of your original script, or was that added later?
I don't know. I don't remember now. I think he was in it. I'll have to dig out that script. I mean, I don't remember. It's been a while.
I mean, I was like 19 or I guess I'd been 20 when that came out or something. But I mean, I really enjoyed it, and I of course read the comics. But like the inclusion of Dorian Gray, I thought was really interesting at the time, especially how he worked to the whole plot towards the end.
Uh-huh.
And the twist.
Yes, I'm trying to. I mean, I'm trying to remember. I know the twists and turns were different in the. I don't think Dorian Gray was in the original script. Actually, I think he was added. And Stuart Townsend was very good in it. He's left movies too. From what I gather, he lives in South America now and does car restoration.
See,
really? That's crazy.
I thought Stuart Townsend was an interesting choice for both Dorian Gray and then when he played Lestat in Queen of the Dam.
Yeah.
But I cannot picture anyone else playing those two characters other than him.
He was originally cast as Aragorn in Lord of the Rings, and he supposedly filmed for like 2 weeks or something until Peter Jackson realized he screwed up, and he's like, I need somebody who's a little older. And then he went and recast for Viggo.
A battle-hardened manner to him. Yeah, Viggo Mortensen's perfect casting for that.
Oh yeah, Viggo's great.
Now, to change direction a little bit and jump back to Malibu Ultraverse and talk about Firearm, you had a line from Firearm that I still quote to this day, where he said, I'm just a Disney guy living in a Touchstone world.
No, I'm a Touchstone guy living in a
A
Disney.
Touchstone guy living in Disney World. Yeah, sorry. That line though.
I'm proud of that line. I still remember it too. Yeah.
What a great line.
I've never heard that before. That's fantastic.
Oh, it was one of my favorites because it clicks automatically. You're like, okay, I know exactly what's going on here.
Well, for anybody who's listening who doesn't get that reference, Disney Studios at the time had basically a Vertigo, I guess you'd want to call it. They had their adult film subsidiary called Touchstone Pictures, and there were a lot of movies out back, and they weren't grim and dark and horrific. They were family comedies and stuff like that, but they weren't Disney movies.
The first one was Splash.
Yeah, well, Splash, yeah, but movies that were a little bit more just not Disney.
Yeah.
So they're more a sense, even when you got mermaids, more a sense that they took place in like the real world, so to speak. So that was and at the time, I lived in Burbank. I lived right close to Disney, and it was just it was just actually, I didn't live in Burbank. I lived in Sierra Madre, which is near Pasadena, but it's close. And it was just a line that I thought of, and I like that line too. Believe me.
To this day, what close to 30 years later, I guess, from when Firearm came out, that's still in my head. I say it backwards every now and again. But it's still there, and I still think that way sometimes. I'll look at something that's going on, and I'm like, that's just what's going on. But yeah, Cully Hamner is from Huntsville, where we're located. And so that first issue of Firearm, there's the kind of chunky balding guy with the mustache, and then the other kind of balding guy with the beard who's skinnier. Where they're having this conversation, and then I forget what happens. A car breaks through the front window or whatever. It's in the first issue there. Those two guys were the owner and the manager of the comic shop that used to be on Andrew Jackson here locally. That was Bill and Eric. And to me, I was like, these guys are immortalized in a comic book forever. This is the coolest thing in the world. I was absolutely aghast and just absolutely loved it. But yeah, that particular line is just one that has stuck in my head this whole time, and it's brilliant. I mean, what a way to sum something up in so few words, but to capture so much.
Well, when I did Malibu, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it, quite honestly, because I felt like almost all of the characters were like them trying to do their version of a Marvel or a DC character in some way.
Yep.
So I pitched Alex Swan, Firearm. Actually, I didn't even want him to have the gun. He was just going to be a private detective, but they wanted him to have something. So Firearm, and that was fine. But when I said about living in Sierra Madre, we're right near Pasadena. That's why I said it there, so I could send Cully or whoever photos of Pasadena, and it had a real sense of stuff. And a lot of Alex Swan, for people that don't know the character, he was an English private detective who the cases, he just longed for a nice, boring divorce case, and he was always getting dragged into these superheroic adventures that he hadn't wanted nothing to do with. He used to be an ex he was in the SBS, which is like the naval version of the SAS, which is like a Navy SEAL. And he just wanted, but he'd retired from that, and he wanted to be a private detective, and he was never allowed to not have these crazy ideas. And they let me do it, and Cully did like the first 3 issues, and came back. I think he did one later, and it was just a fun book to do.
Such a great book.
And what did I do? 18 issues, and they allowed me to end it right. I ended it properly. But it will never be reprinted because none of those Malibu books who are now owned by Marvel because of the contracts, will get reprinted.
Yep.
So get your back issues and enjoy them that way. They get for $1.
And you can get the movie.
$18. What's that?
And you can get the movie.
Oh, well, the movie that was see, there's so many things with that movie. So where do I start with that? So firstly, they wanted a movie, and they wanted I'm trying to remember now. Does it start? Is it the start? For some reason, it was. I forget the reasoning, but their reasoning was it was easier to write. It took longer to do the movie. It took longer to write the comic that went with that movie than it did to actually make the movie, to write and draw it and get it published and everything else. So for that reason, did I write? Was it the first half? Yes, it was. So I wrote the first half, and then the second half was the film. And originally, they said we have a budget of $250,000 to do the second half of a movie, half-an-hour film. And I was like, wow, this is that's not a lot of money at all. But back then, it was more. And I wrote this whole ending that was not expensive, but was a little bit more expensive. It was basically Firearm and the villain kind of having this tense cat and mouse thing. It made sense. There was a whole city built out of like balsa. It was like a city huge. It was like you could walk between the streets like you were King Kong or something. So it was them walking through and they were having this thing, this gunfight, and ultimately it all ends with him killing the guy. But then they said, "Oh, we're not going to do that now. We've only got $100,000." And then they also got this director called Darren Doan, who had done a couple of videos. He was 21 years old, and he was as arrogant as a 21-year-old. Not arrogant. That's probably too strong a word. He was an okay guy, but he was full of himself. He was 21, and
The confidence of youth.
And he thought he knew it all, and so there was just. And he wouldn't. He says, "Don't talk to me. I'm the director. I don't want to hear a note. I've got your script." So just subtle things like they cast an American to play Alex Swan, this English guy from London,
which made no sense.
No sense.
Okay, they did the same thing to John Constantine.
Yes. Well, at least.
I like Keanu.
To be fair, that movie, if that was another character not called John Constantine, the Keanu Reeves one. Are you talking about the Keanu Reeves one, or are you talking about the actor that played him in the DCU?
He's talking about Keanu Reeves.
I was talking about Keanu Reeves. I was just joking.
So that's a good movie. It's just
it is.
It's not John Constantine. But if that was John Constantine's American buddy, Dave Devlin, American occult guy, everyone would love that film.
Yep.
Okay, now I want the adventures of Dave Devlin. Thanks, James. I appreciate that.
What was I talking about?
The Firearm movie. Yeah.
So for instance, like he wouldn't listen. The American guy, he's doing, when you hear him talk, he's doing a Sean Connery impersonation of an English person.
Yep.
And I was like, or a British person. I was like, dude, Sean Connery, if you haven't noticed, is Scottish. If you just tell him to impersonate Michael Caine, doesn't matter how bad he is, it'll sound kind of English enough it'll sound better. But he wouldn't listen, so it's a very imperfect story. But Mike Wieringo did the art, and so even there, I got to work with Mike then, and I did an issue of a Wildstorm Marvel crossover with him too, where I did a kind of weird version of Fantastic Four. But so I got to work with Mike. So there's always something good that comes out of situations, even when they're not perfect.
That was just such a strange and novel thing, though. I mean, I still have my copy. I still got my copy of the movie. I got the whole 9 yards because it was just such a different thing. And
well, I doubt it's ever going to come out on DVD. So treasure that.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I just realized you wrote the movie Comic Book Villains.
I directed it too.
You did?
Yes, right, and directed it.
How the hell did I miss this?
I
was a teenager when that came. I remember when that movie came out, and I was just enamored by it because there weren't movies about comic books, about actual comic book collecting or something. And I don't know, to this day, I still love that movie. I haven't watched it in a long time, but I saw your name. I was like, holy crap!
Thank you for that. I mean, it took a long time to get it made, and I think we had like $1 million something. We didn't have much money, but all these actors came on. They all took minimum. We did the best we could. The problem is that when you're trying to get an independent movie made, I mean, it's a black comedy.
He's great.
And originally we were going to have 30 days, and it got cut day by day by day. They don't go, oh, we're cutting 30 days. It's like, oh, we're doing 28 days. You're like, I can probably still do it for 28 days. And then 28 becomes 26. Probably still, because you're thinking 28. So you're only going down 2 days. So ultimately, they kind of trimmed it to 20 days. And the thing about comedy, especially that kind of dark comedy, the Coen Brothers-y comedy that I was trying to pull off. No, I doubt I did a very good job of it. But you need time. You need time to play the scenes, to rehearse them, to let it all kind of the nuances to come through.
Yeah.
And when you're shooting a movie that has a car going in the in the river and fight scenes and all this, there's a lot of action in that movie. It was always like, well, we're gonna have the fight with the nail gun through the walls, and we've got 4 pages of dialogue to film. So there was never a day when you could focus on one aspect of the script. It was always all over the place. So I love anybody that loves that movie. So thank you.
And
But I only see the version that I wish I had gotten to do.
I understand. Like, but man, let me tell you, like, when that movie came out, I remember watching it with the owner of my local shop and a few of the regulars and stuff. And there's a line in it where I think it's Donnell Luge. He calls Michael Rappaport's character like a magic card seller, like it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
And we all just laughed because the store owner, like, I mean, I live in a very small town. And, magic was like, I'd say about a third of his income probably. It's like, magic cards and comic books and then Pokemon cards. He kind of had to be a dealer of all of them. So for like a decade, we just kept calling that guy, you magic card seller. Like it was a bad thing. Just, I don't know. But it's just great. I mean, to this day, I'll still see some friends from back then and we'll make that line.
Well,
man, I can't believe you directed that. I can't believe I didn't know that. I'm like just shocked.
Oh, that's okay. Well, I mean, but I'm very proud of it. I never directed again. I wrote a couple of things to try and get them off the ground, but it never sort of happened. And I mean, I'm not dead yet. We'll see what the future holds. But at the moment, I'm concentrating on the comic book stuff again,
which I am very excited about as a comic book retailer. I'm really pumped for that, and I'm glad you brought it back around because I don't want us to close out without going back to and hitting on Rogue's Kingdom. The whole concept of Rogue's Kingdom. We had Jeff on a few weeks ago as he was talking, and the hook where he got me was that moment between Rondo and the kid where they have to they decide to make this move, and then they take this responsibility, and it explains the apostrophe location in the title, which I'm a huge fan of. I thought that was great. I told you I was an English nerd. So I was like,
also there are 3 kingdoms. So as we progress arc by arc, you're going to see our heroes go into different kingdoms, and there's also supporting characters. You'll see in the second issue onwards, there is a half fox, half human palace guard, and he will become. And he was just really a background character, and he's already taken on a world of his own in terms of the plot and the story. So there's other interesting characters that down the line. Some are rogues, some are not rogues, but you'll hopefully get to know and enjoy all of them.
I kind of hope after reading the 6-issue story or the 6-page story at the back that we see more of Arlo.
I think Arlo,
I don't know if we will.
No,
but he amused me.
Yes. Well, another one of the characters who you see briefly in issue 2 will be the focus of the second issue, and with Rondo in the past, you'll get to know about their relationship, and that's a short novella that is divided into 4 chapters for the remaining 4 issues of the first arc. I'm very proud of, and it was a lot of fun. I think you'll enjoy that if you enjoy, Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, and when Conan's in a city and there's all that kind of city intrigue. I think you'll enjoy those stories.
I'm very, very excited. I'm a big fan of Jeff Johnson's. I have been for a long time. I have 3 of the original pages hanging on the wall at the store right now. And,
well, hopefully, and you have this new the Lumpland art, so that's good too.
I do.
So yes, so if we're winding up here, anyone who is on the fence, who has not so far pledged anything to the Rose Kingdom issue 1, I guarantee you will be thankful that you did. Great story and great art, and something I'm really proud of, and Jeff is, and I think you will all enjoy it. So please check out the Kickstarter page, and hopefully you will be a part of it too.
Yeah, the guys, there's 2 days left before this Kickstarter ends. It has already funded. It's gone quite past the base level funding for it, but it has funded. You're guaranteed to get this book, and I can tell you, I've read a preview copy of it. I bought some of the original art from it because it makes me extremely happy deep down in my soul. I love everything about this book. We are carrying it at Haven. We backed it at the retailer level. Thank you guys so much for including a retailer level.
God bless you for doing that. Thank you for doing it. Yeah.
We have a thing at Haven. We like to support creators that we are fans of. We figure if we want our creators we love to keep doing work that we love, they kind of need to be able to live off of doing that work, and they need to be paid for what they do so that they can keep creating new things. And so we want to support that, and we want to encourage everybody to support that. So at Haven, we're going to have the book on the shelf. We've ordered it at the retailer level. If you're not local to North Alabama, see if your local shop will pick it up and carry it, and if not, back it yourself. You can always do that. You can do both, because there's multiple covers that are going to be available, all kinds of things, and some of these covers are spectacular. But I'll tell you, if you love comics and if you love good creators doing great work, this is a book you're going to want to pick up. Absolutely. Period. End of story.
Okay, I agree completely with everything that Josh just said.
I would like that written down somewhere. Somebody, please.
I have 2 more questions before we wrap.
Yes, go for it.
One, if the Stargirl TV series had continued, were there any plans or thoughts about bringing Jack or Ted Knight into that? I know Ted was mentioned in passing a few times, but
yeah, and we were very careful to never not say that there was either a Ted Knight son out there or even a Starman somewhere. Yeah. But it was so speculative. I figured. But we were kicking around the idea of springboarding Jack Knight into his own series from Stargirl. Yeah. Which is kind of interesting. It's the reverse of how it was in the comics. Where
a little bit backwards.
Star and Stripes first were kind of springboarded from Starman. But that's fine. I mean, so there was talk of that. And then obviously between me and Jeff and very beginning stages. But then Warner Brothers decided they didn't want to do anything, and it's all gone now.
Yeah. They suck. And my last question is, where did you get the idea for Bobo Benetti?
That's a good question.
That's my favorite. That's like one of my favorite characters from Starman. And I always wish you'd do like a big one shot of him one day or something, or just do another story with that guy.
It's interesting.
He's a great character.
You say that. So that was an issue. DC had, was it 27 or 29? 20,
or maybe it's 29.
But either way, DC had told every book that issue had to be like a jumping on point for the series for their particular book. So it was like you had to tell kind of a complete story whilst filling in new readers on who those characters were and what they represented in terms of the emotion, not just their powers and stuff. And so I wanted to do something. I felt that like it was a good idea, or jumping on points are always good, but I wanted to do something a bit different. And the idea of all of that being told through the point of view of a stranger arriving or coming back to Opal City was a good idea. This is one of those times where he just sprang out of my imagination. So it's a good question. I have a terrible answer.
The dialogue, like the way he talks and the way he interacts with like the bartender and the way he interacts with the younger O'Dare who's tailing him. I can't think of his name. Which one that was?
Mason O'Dare.
Mason, yeah, Mason. He's very, he knows he can take Mason out at any time. He's just being nice, making friends with the kid and making friends with the bartender. And it's just, I don't know. And it's great how he's just kind of weighing out his day if he wants to go back to jail or not.
One of the what I was trying to do there in terms of the way he spoke was to channel the way that the Rat Pack would talk.
Yeah, I mean, he's walking embodiment. Yeah.
So it was it was me trying to write like that kind of a character. The other character that in a way, if you're familiar with I forgot who it was that did all the good noir. They also did. My mind's gone blank. RKO.
Oh, RKO did great stuff. Yeah.
Robert Mitchum, back when he was doing movies and he had that kind of just slightly laconic way of acting. It was a mixture of Rat Pack and Robert Mitchum. So, it just came out of my head. And also Robert Mitchum has presence. When he was young, he has that presence. I always loved the fact that if you guys, this is old TV, but I used to love the Equalizer with Edward Woodward. And there was 2 episodes. He had a heart attack in real life, so they wrote his kidnapping into the Equalizer for 2 episodes. And they're like, well, who can we get to find the Equalizer? We need the American Equalizer to find the British Equalizer in the show. So for 2 episodes, it was Robert Mitchum as the Equalizer trying to track this guy down and save him. Huh. So the fact that he's, even as an old man, he had that kind of presence. I guess he was older man. That's what I tried to bring to Bobo Benetti, and I love that character. And I even in Grunking Knoll, when he's like strung up, I wanted you to think I'd killed him off, and then you have that page when you realize, he needed a moment to recoup, and now he's back. So
when you
go on,
I'm sorry, I was like when the Shade miniseries came out like 10 years ago, I was like hoping so much he'd show up in that somewhere.
Well,
the Shade series was amazing too. I love that you went back and redid that, and it really expanded on his story, because the way you rebuilt that character from what he was is truly amazing. Like you made that character into just an awesome character.
I mean, if I'm honest with you, I consider that I created that character.
I mean, I wholeheardly agree. I don't even really think of the Shade before that at all. Like
the Shade before, when he was one of Flash's rogues, he had that goofy kind of top hat and pixie boots look.
Yeah, he's just kind of the guy.
He didn't have a secret identity. He didn't have a name. I mean, like literally nothing about the character that exists now was the version, apart from the shadow powers, was a part of him before I came along. So I feel strongly that he kind of, and when anyone tries to write him again, he just isn't the same. It's not. I have him in my head. I can literally write him any day how he speaks. It's just in my head.
It's amazing. I love that character.
Can't find anybody else to do that.
Oh, I have one more question that I just remembered.
Go on.
An easy one. The story where Jack frees Mikhail from the carnival.
Yes.
The name Johnny Sorrow.
Yes.
When you mentioned that name, did you know that was going to be a character that they might use later, or was that just a name you threw out?
No, it was in, and he's also in.
Because he shows up like two years later, and then he becomes like a big JSA villain.
Yeah, that's just like Jeff. Jeff sometimes like digs around and finds stuff and goes, "Oh, I'm going to use that."
Yeah.
If I'm honest with you, it's one of the things I don't like. I like stories to be. I like little references to be off, so people can write their own story around it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes more than that. That's one of the things about some writers. They want to. I'm not knocking Jeff; he's my buddy, but But there are writers who just want to kind of explain everything away, and sometimes you just have to let the reader have the fun of coming up with their own little side stories for those.
Like one of my favorite little things from Starman that I always think about, I think it's like issue 3 or 4 or something. It's some guy breaks into Jack's store and wants a shirt that has like a portal to heaven in it.
Yes.
Yeah, he's trying to steal it, and Jack's like, "Just buy it from me."
Yeah. and they work it out that way. Yeah.
And then you never see the guy again, and I was like, "All right, that was awesome."
Well, except it's the same magic as the poster demon, so it's sort of meant to link up very peripherally. The end that it's that same portal energy.
Yeah.
Now, you said you had some other projects in the works as well, some prose things, and you hinted that there's a book that might be coming soon.
Yeah, there is.
What can you tell us about that and the kind of timing on that?
Oh, well, it's a little too early to say too much, but I've written a prose. It's a sort of it's a fantasy whodunit, or a fantasy locker room mystery, and
I'm on board already.
And it introduces a pair of characters, and I mean that's not much of it's not saying very much, is it? I will be more than happy to come back on closer to the date and talk more about it, but I just want to make sure it's perfect before I begin the next process.
Well, two things about that. One, we will absolutely ask you to come back on and talk about it. We could sit and listen to you all day. We've hardly talked because we want to hear what you have to say, and we are just soaking it all in like sponges.
Well. I mean, I've enjoyed writing the characters so much that I thought I was going to write one more short story with them, and I ended up writing 4 novellas, which are longer than a novelette. No, right. Novelette. Which is the longer one, the novelette or a novella? I can't remember.
The novella's longer.
Novella's longer. So they're all. I checked word count. They're all novellas. So I already have a second book, which would be the 4 of those novellas as a series of stories to follow. So it's something I'm really committed to. So that's why I want to take the time and make sure I do it right, like the launch, and make sure that everything is done in the right manner.
What kind of timeline do you think that might be?
Well, it'll be announced and everything next year, early part of next year. I would be annoyed with myself if it wasn't a real thing, if not published, at least announced and on its way by mid next year. And then I also have it's probably too early to talk about them, but I have 2 series. They're just mini series, but they're definitely ones that have a potential to be more than that. I'm doing those with Dark Horse. I have a couple of other things. I've got artists that I've worked with before. That's all I'll say. Coming up too. There's like 5 or 6 things of mine. I know I haven't been around for a while in comics, but next year and what follows, you're going to see quite a bit from me.
Well, I think Rogue's Kingdom is a fantastic re-entry for you and for Jeff, honestly, into comics. Just as a great way to come back in. And I love the decision. You kind of briefly touched on it earlier, the decision to make it a feel good, not feel good, that's not the right term, but a straight up family friendly kind of a story and plot. That was a brilliant decision because right now, as a retailer, I have a kid, a 10-year-old kid who walks into my shop and is like, I want to read Spider-Man. And I can't point him to a good Spider-Man book because they're not for kids. It's not that they're too cerebral or anything. They're just not for kids. The subject matter is not for kids.
Yeah, I mean, I've been perhaps guilty of that in the past of making things too mature. But even I look at stuff now and I'm like, some of these books that Marvel and DC, I was like, who are these for? Like, it doesn't really feel like they a 10-year-old. Like I have those same thoughts, and at the same time, I understand older people wanting their comic book fix and their superhero fix. So I can't fault that. But I wish that there was more stuff that wasn't either for like little kids or for these adults. That mid ground, which I talked about with Starman way back.
Right.
I kind of want to do that, but a little bit lean it more into leave it to chance. I mean, the amount of people that come up and said, you know, I enjoy sitting down reading this with my daughter or my son, you know, and I don't feel like I'm reading some childish story. That's what we're trying to pull off with this, you know. So, by the way, if you haven't seen the 1970s Three Musketeers and Four Musketeers, do yourself a favor and check it out. That's the tone we'll be going for.
Some
Is
of
that
my
the one with
favorites.
Raquel Welch?
Raquel Welch is in it. Yes, she's
Yeah.
Constance. Right.
Yeah, I grew up on those. That's some of my favorites.
So that's why I'm looking forward to Rogue's Kingdom.
Sorry, mate. What?
That's why I'm looking forward to Rogue's Kingdom, because my daughter is 12 and she collects also. But there's very few books that we both read that we can pass back and forth and then talk about how much we enjoy it. Well, Rogue's Kingdom will be one of those books where we can read it and pass it back and forth.
And Prince Terra, who's my homage to the Japanese animated series and manga Princess Knight from the 60s. Will definitely, she's like, 14. So it's I want her to resonate with, you know, with that, like your daughter and kids like that, you know. So and then Peachy too. I mean, the idea of this little thief that slowly gets a conscience and becomes a hero, like he has a real arc, and it's a positive arc, and it'd be nice for kids, you know.
Yeah. Now, see,
I'm so excited for it.
The copy that we're going to pass back and forth is going to be her copy, because my copy is coming signed from Kickstarter.
Okay,
Her
good.
That's right.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. Please give my regards to your daughter, by the way. What's her name?
Her name is Lily.
Lily, lovely name. Please give my regards to her.
Thanks, I will.
Guys, you can see at the bottom of the screen the Kickstarter link. Absolutely, for the love of all things holy, go there, back this book, support these creators. These are guys that we've loved their stuff. You can hear it. You heard what Damon said earlier. And Owen, I know you haven't really said it, but you feel the same way about what James has written as Damon does, if not more so.
Oh yeah, I mean, I feel the emotion and the connection and everything I've read that he's written.
Thank you very much.
The Golden Age, and even the Justice League story you mentioned earlier that you said was interfered with a lot. What's it called?
Sorry, mate. What?
What's the name of the Justice League story? What was the art called?
Did the Justice League story?
The Justice League story you did.
You mean Cry for Justice?
Yeah, Cry for Justice. Yeah.
Oh, that one. I might have taken a misturn at parts of that. I shouldn't have killed off the little kid. I feel bad about that. And did I? Oh, and that's
man,
why
that was a dark story, like all around, and it was. But yeah. I think it served a purpose. I dug it.
Well, that was why someone. I was at a panel, and a guy who was a father said just how upset it made him that I'd killed this child, and I felt really bad. And I said, I tell you what, I'll bring a child into the DC universe, and to make up for it. It meant a lot to him that I said that, and that ultimately that's why in the final issue of the Justice League book, Jessie Quick is pregnant with she's pregnant with Our Man's kid.
That's good.
That was why and then because I knew it was all going to get blown up by DCU anyway by that new relaunch, so I could kind of end it however I wanted. So the fact that Jessie Quick was pregnant at the end was me kind of atoning for killing off Roy Harper's daughter. But when I did, although she's now alive again anyway, so it all gets fixed.
The one thing I'll say about Starman is that, and I mean, I don't know if you were conscious about this when you wrote it. You probably were, but it's just, to me, it's a story about connections and the importance of having connections and not losing those connections. Absolutely. And how dark life can get when you don't have those connections.
Yes.
Because, to me, it's like when it starts, Jack is this very closed off individual, and he starts reconnecting with all these people who are from his past or are entering his life through his new adventures. And like I said, the world building is just amazing because each one of these individuals has a purpose, like long-term and short-term. And it's just great to see how it bounces off, because Jack's not really he is the main character, but there are so many other characters that take the reins at times.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
and it just
Isn't
is a book
quite
about
an
connections.
ensemble book, but it is close. It is sort of a little bit ensemble-y. And one
Yeah.
of the things I wanted to do with it was the idea. There's a quote. I think it's by Mark Twain. I hate to say definitely it's by Mark Twain, but I think it is. And it's when I was 18 years old, I thought my father was a fool. But I went to college. I came back when I was 21, and I was surprised by how much the old man had learned. And it's so the idea of Jack Knight thinking his father is this old fuddy-duddy and superheroics is dumb and everything, and slowly getting the responsibility, but also the admiration. He begins to truly admire his father. That was something I definitely wanted to pull off or accomplish with that series. So I'm glad you enjoyed it, and Owen, and it means a lot to me to hear what you're saying. Very much.
It means a lot to me just to have this opportunity to talk to you. You can ask Josh, like, for as long as he's known me, you know, I'll tell anyone, like, my favorite comic book character is Swamp Thing. But my favorite comic book, period, is Starman.
Yeah, I'll take that. That's great.
Well, it's just like from start to finish, top to bottom. Like it resonates hard with me. Like, and I didn't have a bad relationship with my father, but he was a farmer and I was a comic book nerd. We didn't have a lot to talk about, but you know, we made it work, and he was my best friend. So it resonates to some degree with me that way. But you made me cry. You made me cry over Solomon Grundy, which was a feat in itself. Like,
well,
like,
thank you.
What you did with Solomon Grundy was truly amazing.
Well, that started. We're going to be on here forever, aren't we?
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. I'm just worried about people getting bored. You know, they're watching this. But what that happened was that Tony, who it's a little bit of a I don't care what people what the look is or the feel is. I'm going to do my own thing. So it was always a little bit reining him in with that. So with Swamp Thing, with Solomon Grundy, he did this very different version. He looked different and everything else. So ultimately, it became fun for me to try and work out a story where all of the different versions of Grundy, because even apart from how different Tony's Grundy was from every other Grundy, when he was that big version that is the sort of established version, sometimes he's mindless. Like Jeff Loeb just had him yelling "Born on Monday" in
see,
and
what I was used to.
Sometimes he was quite literate in other regions, because obviously no one sat down and said, "Hey, guys, we got to work this one out." So writers are free to do their interpretation. So making sense of those different versions was a lot of fun for me, and that came from Tony being a maverick and going off and doing the visual version that he did.
You made him into Lenny from Of Mice and Men.
A little bit. That's very, very much.
Bit,
yeah.
Which is one of the most tragic characters in all of literature. Just such a tragedy, Lenny is.
Well, I mean, the way Grundy's story ends in Starman is truly tragic. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just top to bottom though. Yeah, you capture emotions so great, and it's.
Thank you very much.
I'm glad you're getting back into comics.
Yes, I will tell you as we sign off here, James. I don't know if we'll ever get Owen to come back on the show now. He's talked to Tony Harris, and he's talked to you, and I think he may just give up and go to heaven now.
Yeah, and John Ostrander was a cherry too.
John Ostrander too.
Oh, yeah, John Ostrander, great.
Like, you know, at the beginning of this year, I never thought I'd talk to any of y'all, and now I've got all three of you under my belt.
Good. Well, I mean, hopefully I'll come back when I have more going on, and I think you'll be excited by the stuff I announce in the coming year.
I'm excited for I don't know why I can't think right now. For Rogue's
Kingdom is going to be awesome.
Rogue's Kingdom, man, I don't know why I can't talk. Rogue's Kingdom, sorry.
All right, guys. Is this it?
Thank you so very much, sir, for coming on and joining us.
Josh, Alan, Owen, it's been a real pleasure talking to you guys. Really has.
We look forward to talking to you again.
Regards
Pleasure's all over here.
To Darren, was it? What was his name?
Damon.
Yeah, his wife Julie. Yes.
And Julie.
I hate that he couldn't stay longer because he is a massive fan.
Yes, he is.
It was nice talking to him when he was on.
Yes.
All right, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You are a gentleman and a scholar. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Cheers, everybody.
All right. Good night, sir. All right, guys. Um,
I guess we lost Owen at the same time.
he didn't want to talk to us. He was here to talk to James Robinson.
That's good, because I was dreading seeing Owen anyway. Good Lord Almighty.
We've run late. I know we've run late, but I could literally, as long as he's willing to talk, I was willing to listen.
I know, and I said the same thing when Johnson was on. If you can shut us up, you are doing something. Just keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. Holy smokes.
We've been going for over 2 hours now, so I'm going to say my spiel right quick. For everybody that's local, please do not forget that tomorrow, Friday, November the 10th, starting at 6 p.m. is 24 hours at Haven. For those of y'all that don't know, Josh and I are getting together and we are teaming up with Nick and Dustin Ellis from Two Brothers Comics. We will be spending 24 hours inside of Haven for two reasons. One, there's something wrong with us. And two,
that's the only reason my wife thinks we're doing it.
Yep. And two, which is the more important reason, we are trying to raise money for Kids to Love. It's a great organization. They help foster children. They help foster children get the things that they need. Everybody that I know personally, I know for a fact that you can afford to swing by Haven and donate $5. $5 is not a ton of money coming out of your pocket. I don't want to hear it. I know y'all personally. Get over it. Swing by, donate it. And here's the reason why. We're roughly a month away from Christmas, and every kid deserves to get a present for Christmas. Kids to Love is a local charity, and we can help out a lot of kids. I just need y'all to get off your lazy butts sometime between 6 p.m. tomorrow night and 6 p.m. Saturday. If you show up at 6:01 Saturday, I'm still going to take the money, but I'm going to be mad at you because you were given 24 hours. 24 hours and 1 minute is not acceptable. Even though
if you need further enticement, we also have some sales going on, particularly over the course of the night, the wee hours. If you are out because you are a lunatic and you stayed up too late and you've gone to Crystal's because you're like, dude, I can't go home yet. I'm still too pumped up from whatever it is. You can go to Crystal's and then you can get your butt over to Haven. And we're going to not only be there to take money up for Kids to Love and support foster kids right here in North Alabama, but we're also got a bunch of sales going on, and we add something new to the sale every hour through the night from 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. until 5 a.m. And the sales run through 7 o'clock Saturday morning because we want to see if, that statue you've just always had your eye on but couldn't quite pull the trigger, if putting that on sale at 4 o'clock in the morning means you're going to be like, dude, I guess I should go buy that. We just want to see who shows up. That's one thing. Second thing, and I don't know if you even know this, Alan, I may have told you already, but Aaron Michaels, his mom has a full up popcorn machine. And I'm talking like with the red deal on wheels. You turn the big bucket in there, the whole nine.
Oh, yeah.
He's bringing that out tomorrow.
Yeah, we're at the point where I don't even know who all is. All I know is there's definitely 4 of us that are going to be there.
Tom's planning to stay for a long time. Aaron Michaels is going to stay. And we'll see who else. I know Mike Weslowski said he was swinging by. Tots is swinging by. How long these people decide to hang out, Lord only knows.
I'm pretty sure Bill will swing by. And like I said, guys, it's real. Yes, are we stupid for doing this? We're stupid for doing this. It's something
so stupid.
Honestly, Nick Ellis from Two Brothers Comics had this idea almost 2 years ago.
Yep.
And for 2 years, we have sat around going, when are we going to do this and get it over with? When are we going to do this and get it over with? Well, tomorrow we're going to do it and get it over with. But I promise y'all, all 4 of us are also in the background going, man, I cannot believe I'm doing this.
We're glad it's not just me.
Yeah, we're going to hang out 24 hours straight. It's for Kids to Love.
We might even still be friends when this is all said and done.
Yeah, we might be. I mean, honestly, that's the only reason why I love my friends. I love hanging out with the 3 of y'all. I love talking to y'all. 24 hours straight may be a little much. I'm pretty sure someone might pass out from laughing at some point.
Yep.
But the main reason is for kids to love. I mean, that's just the whole point behind all this, as far as I'm concerned.
Yep. Absolutely. Could
Wait
not
a
agree
minute.
more. Let's see. We sometimes do get our Image and DC shipments come together. It should actually be at the shop by Friday, by tomorrow. So it might be. And if it is, I recommend that we do exactly that.
A 1 a.m. reading of G.I. Joe 301.
We'll read that bad boy and then we'll talk about it like book club, and it'll be great.
It'll be great. If you do follow us on YouTube, make sure you turn on the notifications. Nick and I have kind of joked back and forth. I personally want to live stream a D&D game. I know there's people out there that would actually watch that. We'll go live back and forth occasionally, just doing stupid stuff. So don't forget to turn on all notifications. And that's kind of my spiel for the next 24 hours. I'm going to try to stay up late tonight and sleep in a little bit tomorrow, and we'll see what happens.
Same thing, man. I'm like, can I squeeze in a nap tomorrow afternoon at some point?
Oh, I'm off work tomorrow, so I'm going to definitely squint. We've got something we got to go do in the morning, but I'm already like, if I can get home by this time, that means I can sleep from here to here.
Yep. All right, guys. It has been a phenomenal night talking with James Robinson. What an amazing guy. Really excited about that. I'm telling you, Rogue's Kingdom is a great book. Get on Kickstarter and back it. You're not going to regret it. It's phenomenal. And it's really laying the groundwork for what's going to be an amazing story. Having read the first one, I'm champing at the bit for the second one, and I already know I want the third one. So I'm really, really, really excited about that. So you guys get on board the Kickstarter. There's only 2 more days for it. In Britain, that would be horribly rude. There's only 2 more days for it. Go out and get on that Kickstarter right away. Come out to Haven tomorrow for our 24 hours in a comic shop. And if you're not local, just pay attention to your notifications, because we will be going live periodically, and Lord only knows what we're going to be up to. So it should be a lot of fun. In the meantime, you guys have a great night, and we will catch you tomorrow.